Hi everyone. So in this video, I am going to be going over what SIR 4 and 5 require from you, the capstone, and also the reflection for the capstone, so that you know exactly what you need to provide for the DOE. So for SIR 4 and 5, we have the same thing as SIRs 1, 2, and 3, where you have to tell me about the lesson sequence, your content objective, which is your Common Core standard, your language objective, which has the 4 parts, the domain, it has the language function, it has the content, and it has the differentiation, and then the language objective differentiation for proficiency levels, which tells me about your WIDA levels. So for example, if you have a WIDA level 1, how is that different from a WIDA level 3 and what you're expecting them to do? On every SIR, it has the 7 steps to teaching vocabulary. You have to do this for one word. So make sure that you just pick one word and quickly go through how you would do the 7 steps. This is just a review from SIR 4 that you have to include at the top. So if you look at the rubric, this is how I grade SIR 4. So is it your own time? Is it your own work? All right, great. Is it submitted on time? And again, for everyone here, because we have today off, and then this week we have the math MCAS retake, I am having all your work be submitted by Wednesday of next week. I'm giving you 2 extra days to get it done. Mechanics, did you edit your work? Make sure it's grammatically correct. Lesson sequence, does your lesson sequence explain to me what you are doing with at least a sentence justification or description of your lesson? And your language objectives. So if you look specifically at the language objectives, what I want to go over here is if you want distinguished, you differentiate for 2 proficiency levels. So if you want exemplary, you would differentiate for more than 2 proficiency levels. I'm not sure where I cut out content objective, but for the content objective, refer to a Common Core standard, a specific one, and tell me what the students will be able to do with that Common Core standard. Tier vocabulary, we did this in SIR 1, so make sure that you are completing this. Make sure that each tier has words in it. As long as they're chosen for instructional potential, you would get proficient. If you can use them across content areas, you get exemplary. And if it serves as a model that I could send to the DOE, you get the last one. So this is still the same as the other SIRs. We have the 3 same questions. What I would say to do is, for proficient, you discuss some future implementation. Here you give specific plans about how you are going to implement, and also you tell me how students were specifically impacted. Here a lot of people have been including quotes or describing for me what happened with students. I would add that into your SIRs. And over here, this last one, introspective personal growth. So whatever you think that means. This is where the SIRs differentiate for people. So for the write around, and I put this here so that I would remember to explain this for you kindergarten teachers or first, second grade. So for kindergarten, first, second grade, I know that you are struggling in general to just get mainstream students to produce sentences. So if you wanted to write specifically on your SIR that you differentiated and you required students to write a word and use the content vocabulary like the other strategy we went over, just make sure you state that explicitly in your SIR and that was a differentiation you made for your classroom. Or maybe another differentiation you use is for WIDA's level 1 and 2. you give them a sentence stem and they just have to complete a word, or you give them a prompting question and they have to complete that question. But if you finagle this in any sort of way, please let me know. So what I would write for this part is I would say and write out, 1, I modeled the write around strategy. What that meant was that I showed students how to complete the directions. I modeled for them writing on the piece of paper, whatever. You explain your steps. For students working in groups, you could even add this into part of your differentiation, and you could say that you had heterogeneous groups, or you put the same languages together. How did you make those groups? This, I feel like, is self-explanatory, and you would just say, I had students clean the desk. I would say that maybe here you talk about maybe the students repeated the directions back to you. Maybe they explained them in their own language. How did you go over the directions again for understanding? What prompt did you use? So I know for my students one time I found $1 million and they had to continue the story. So what prompt? How did you get their interest? This you would just state, I reviewed tier 2 and 3 words, such as something, 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 so that they knew to use these words in their writing. Then you passed out the paper, and then students started. So I would just explain this to me. It is going to be similar to your lesson sequence, but just walk me through it. I want to feel like I'm in your classroom. So for this, if you give me what you do for each step, it's proficient. If you actually can tell me what students produced that was content specific, maybe give me some examples, I can use that here and give you distinguished. And then this is where students produce a full page of work using tier 2 and 3 vocabulary. I think this is the real difference between these two columns. So this is that they're using specific vocabulary from the text, and this is that they're writing in that content level. So again, the difference I would look for here is both of these columns are about content, but this final one specifically addresses the content that you have identified previously in your 7 steps. If you do ratiocination, same thing. You tell me that you modeled it. How did you model it? What did you say? And then this right here says you select 1 or 2 items. So are you going to be looking at the first words in the paragraph and bracketing? Are you going to be going over words that students use all the time and doing that wavy bit? Are you going to be circling the to be verbs? However else you want to focus on ratiocination, that's fine. I believe this was in page 108 in your participants manual. So what exactly did you focus on? Tell me that. And then I would say, explain to me what the students are ratiocinating. So it says right here, use own work. Maybe you had them do a quick do now writing prompt. Maybe they had to reflect on a homework assignment. I don't know, but it could be as small as a paragraph, a kindergarten, first grade, second grade. It could be a sentence. But what did you focus on? Tell me, give me that information. What did the students use? What did the students say when they looked at their work? So maybe if you were doing this in a high school class, they noticed that they kept beginning sentences with the word the. Tell me that. What did students realize from their writing? How did you tell them to improve? So again, if a student keeps beginning a sentence with the word the, maybe that's when you go over, okay, well, let's talk about how to use transitional words. Let's go over first, second, and third. Let's add that into your writing. Or maybe if this is with first and second grade, okay, you keep using the word said. Let's go over how to use a thesaurus and fix this. And then they edit. So what I would say for your rubric here is that students here, they apply the strategy. This is one type of ratiocination. So are you specifically focusing on vocabulary? Are you focusing on transitional words? Are you focusing on the verb to be? You pick one for this. Apply a few. I would say that this is probably 2 items that they're looking to ratiocinate. And then this is several, so that's 3 or more. You are only required to do 1 or 2. So if you do 2, you will fall into here. If you do extra, you will fall into here. If you do 1, that's where you're going to go. The last one, cut and grow. So I would, again, talk to students, how did you model this? Just like I did with you on Monday night, I was in front of the class, I had a sample sentence on the board, I cut it, I discussed with you, whatever. How did you model it? So here, you select a sentence that you would like to improve. This is just one sentence. I would write for me, I picked this sentence. I picked this sentence because. Explain that to me. Just tell me you cut the paper and tell me you taped it onto something. And then, how did you specifically improve that sentence? Were you looking for the academic language for the content area? Maybe you had the kids refer back to the tier 1, 2, and 3 vocabulary. Maybe you were looking at something specific in the grammar. The tiering the words would probably be the easiest to refer back to. Tell me that you revised the sentence, what the new sentence was, and then tell me that you had kids reread. Maybe what did those kids say? What did the students reflect on after they read the sentences out loud? So for proficient, what I feel like this is asking for is that you do complete all the steps and you implement it, and students had time to develop their strategies, but there's really nothing more to it. You did it, you tried, okay. But here, I feel like when you give me the reflector, tell me what the kids did, this tells me more about combining sentences. So maybe you just did not focus on this content area, the content area words, but you also focused on, that's a terrible arrow, we're going to go with it. You also focused on combining the sentences. You also focused on adding maybe even more vocabulary. For example, the word said. That's probably not going to be one of your tiered words, but maybe you had students focus more on how you could change that. And then here, the students are just producing some really awesome work. So that's the SIRs. Those are the SIRs. Right now, I'm going to explain to you the capstone and what I should be seeing in the capstone. So same as before, your work is on time. It's your own work. You have edited it, and you tell me what content area you're in, what curriculum you're following. So instead of writing something like just science, I would make it a little more explicit, like 10th grade biology or 7th grade earth science. Give me a little bit more. Tell me the curriculum you're following. Tell me if it's Common Core standards. And all of that information, the curriculum content area, will go here. Tell me how many students you have in your class, total, and then how many ELL students you have. So this part for the linguistic and cultural backgrounds, you just tell me what your students' backgrounds are. So I would just say in your classroom, do you have students from El Salvador, Colombia? Do you have SIFE students? Do you have students with special needs? What kind of classroom do you have? Over here, your levels of English proficiency. So I would tell me where the students fall under WIDA. So this part, you actually fill in here. I know someone had been asking me about how many students you need to fill out. So there's only 4 spots there. Clearly, if you only have 1 or 2 students in your class that are ELL, you will only fill out 1 or 2 students. If you have 13, 14, 15, 25, pick 4 you want to focus on, and then tell me what their access scores are. So maybe their reading is like a 3.2, their writing is like a 2.2 because it's usually behind, speaking is a 3, listening is a 3.1, whatever. I don't have enough room, but just include the WIDA scores that you have, and these should be found in your cumulative folder, or you can ask Sarah for them. And then if there's any other services that your students are getting, please let me know here. For example, are they getting special ed? Is there ELL pullout in your school? What's going on with those students to provide them with the language that they need? Here, to get the exemplary, I would just tell me how you would use that information to strengthen your classroom curriculum. So if you know that a student has special needs and is also ELL, what specifically are you going to do to accommodate for that student? So this is the same as the SIRs. The only difference is that it asks for your mentor text. So I would actually give me your name of your mentor text, the author, whatever, the edition. Just give me all that information as if this was a works cited page. Everything else I feel like is the same, so I would refer to the beginning of this video if you have questions on the Common Core Standard, language objectives, or tier. And this just goes over what the rubric requires, so it does not change from what the SIRs have. The only new part that you haven't seen before is this, which you tell me your mentor text, maybe tell me how it works with ELLs for the full credit. What I would notice here is I would just take a look at how many points these different parts are worth, because the tiered vocabulary definitely goes up, so I'd make sure to pick vocabulary that's important for your content but across content areas. For tier 2, those words go across content areas, and I would maybe highlight or put in a different color the words you're specifically focusing on in class. So for this part, you need to provide me with information about your students, about the skills or knowledge that they need to complete the work in your classroom. So if they are writing an essay, or if they are reading a book, what kind of skills do they need beforehand? They need those decoding skills if they're reading and trying to comprehend a text. If they're writing, they need to know different styles or genres of writing. What could they have learned in their schools before, but you need to transfer over? So maybe they know some of those words like first, second, and third, but we just need to transfer them over. So if you look at the rubric, the main difference is here you note what those differences are, but that's it. You just note them. Here you tell me how it's going to affect your instruction. So what are you going to do to then help those kids once you identify that they have knowledge and skills that you're bringing over? And then this one is just, you have given me a lot of information and have fully thought this out. Your assessment, this looks to me like, how are you going to understand that your students are learning the new vocabulary? So it says specifically here, tier 2 and 3 words in student discourse, it could be written or oral. So how at the end of class are you going to understand that your students have mastered this new vocabulary? So I would say maybe even an exit ticket, or having the kids answer a question orally before they leave, or based on the do now for the next day. How are you going to know that students learned in your class? And specifically saying how that assessment connects to what you were doing in class. So here is just, it's evident that you gave them an assessment that connects to the content and their language development. For distinguished, it looks like it's an ongoing assessment. So what that would mean is for this question, maybe you add 1 or 2 sentences of reflection, like, I give an exit ticket weekly. Based on that, I adjust my lessons. So after giving my students this exit ticket, asking them about the vocabulary, I know that in the future I need to pre-teach my vocabulary more often, or I need to go over this word and this word again in my next lesson because students do not understand them. So how is your assessment helping your instruction in your classroom? And actually, if you add that part about how it is going to affect your future classes, I would even venture to say that that could be exemplary because you're trying to improve your practice. So what assessment are you giving students? Why are you giving it to them? How are you looking at it? And how is it going to help your future classes? I feel like that would fall into this category. So this next step is really what we've been doing in class for the past 4 or 5 meetings. So the content and concept language integration is this whole thing. So that goes along with the whole, this whole section of the capstone. And all this means is that you did the work. This means that I can see you actually going through it and I understand the lesson and it makes sense and everything you put together works together. And then the discourse integration. So what I would say for this is your explicit lesson sequence. What are you doing throughout this lesson to help your students learn? And does it cover speaking, writing, listening, reading? Some of these might cover more than one because if you have like reciprocal reading, students are writing, they are speaking to each other, they are listening, and they are reading. Okay, so it covers all of them. But what I would do is I would make sure that you hit all 4 of these domains by the end of the lesson. And then tell me specifically, how does it connect to your content and language objective? Well, if your Common Core standard is to cite specific and textual evidence, if it's RL 9-10-1, if it's that, then reciprocal reading does follow that strategy because I'm pulling out information from the text. So the first thing you're going to want to do is connect it back to your content and language standards. Then you are going to tell me, again, how does it connect to the content? So that still goes along with the first one. How is it specifically building knowledge? And how are students going to then produce oral or written discourse? So if I am having students do reciprocal reading, I'm having them access the content so that then they can write me an exit ticket or write me a paragraph summary about what they have read, which again goes back to the Common Core standard of citing specific and textual evidence. So how is everything you're doing connected? Mainly, you need to understand vocab to be able to read, to be able to produce writing in a style like what you have read. So how is it all connected? And how does doing it in that that order make it comprehensible for students? We talked in class last week about how reading or pre-teaching the vocab makes it easier to actually do the reading. So again, how is the input comprehensible for your students? So quickly, make sure to connect back to your content language objectives. Tell me how the strategies build on each other. And how does it help ELL students? You could even just bullet these. So 1, 2, 3, and explain it for that strategy. 1, 2, 3, and bullet those all the way down. This just talks specifically about the strategies you can use. So when I looked on our website, these are the specific strategies that you learned how to do in class. So, for vocabulary, you will show me the 7 steps. For reading, I would pick one of these. And for writing, I would pick one of these. As long as you implement them, you will be right here. Now, if you implement them, but you can show me that you are incorporating reading, listening, speaking, and writing, and you address all those different domains, this is where you'll fall into. If you integrate all 4 and can explain to me how each one helps your students comprehend the text, this is where you'll go. So again, go back to the other page, look at how I bulleted each point and do it like that. The further practice is just what homework you're going to assign the students and why that homework specifically helps students to comprehend what you were doing in class. So this is just pretty much you have an extension activity. And this one is that your extension activity still discusses how students are going to be using the language and using the content that you have taught them. This is a checklist to make sure that you have all these different parts in your SEI capstone lesson. This is another checkoff list for what we have done in class. And then you'll have the reflection with me. So this is done in our small groups. What I'll do for that is there will be a group of probably 6 or 7 of us, and I will have one person take notes for whoever is presenting, so that when that person is done presenting, whoever took notes for them can provide them pretty much with guidelines for what they're going to include in the reflection. So you want someone to take notes for you while you're presenting. You want someone to say like what you did well, what was going on in your lesson, the feedback that you're getting, because you will not have time to write this down while we're discussing. You will really be having the conversation with us, and we just need a scribe for you at that point. So in your final reflection, you have these 5 talking points. What I would do is I would do 1 paragraph for each talking point. So that would be about a 2 to 3 page reflection. So the first question asks, how is learning your student needs, so maybe address WIDA levels, how is knowing your students' WIDA levels helpful for when planning instruction? How is, the next one asks for how knowing those levels helped you how knowing those levels helped you differentiate for your different levels so that they could access the text. So this is going to be specifically about the differentiation that you use or the strategies. How do you test them separately so that you can make sure that all students are comprehending what's going on? What do you plan to do in the future? And then this part is specifically about the feedback that the scribe for you gives you. Read through that feedback and then give me a response to the feedback that you got from the group. And this is how you will be graded on the reflection, own work, on time. You give me a presentation. It shows that you have reviewed the SEI principles and you thought about how best to serve your class. This explains maybe showing leadership in the group, so participating a lot when other people are talking, having feedback, being prepared for questions that people have for you, furthering discussion, pretty much, can we talk about your work and can you talk about other people's work using these strategies and using these ideas that we've talked about in class? And then here, for the reflection, you address all the questions and provide feedback from the participants with some discussion about future implementation. Here, you give me specific plans. How are you going to implement what people say? And this one, you provide examples. So this might, again, be quotes. It might be direct takeaways saying, like, someone said this and I said this in response to them. And then the last one, again, talks about professional growth and how you will achieve student success. So I hope this helps everyone. I know that that's a lot. I know this is a super long video because I've just been sitting in my room talking for about a half hour and my roommate thinks I'm crazy. But please let me know if you have any further questions, if you want me to explain anything further, and I will see you all on Monday.